The sky over Nova Prime burned like molten metal. Smoke twisted upward from the city's shattered spires, curling into clouds tinged red and black. In the distance, enormous alien warships hung in orbit like predatory beasts, their hulls gleaming under the planet's pale sun. Lasers cut through the atmosphere in jagged, deadly streaks. Buildings exploded, sending shards of concrete into streets already littered with bodies. The screams of civilians mixed with the roaring engines of fleeing ships, echoing across the ravaged colony. Captain Mara Voss stood on the command balcony of Nova Prime's central tower, her eyes scanning the chaos below. Her hands gripped the rail tightly, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to act, but there was nothing she could do to stop the tidal wave of destruction. The colony's defenses had been crushed within minutes. The alien warlords had come not to negotiate, but to annihilate. Status report. Mara shouted into the comlink. Her voice trembled despite the armor she wore, her normally calm tone shredded by fear and anger. Command, the shields are down, all planetary cannons offline, civilian transport pods either destroyed or disabled, a young officer replied, his voice cracking. We're exposed. A bright explosion cut through his words. The blast threw Mara backward against the balcony wall, knocking her helmet to the ground. Heat and dust choked the air. When she pushed herself up, the city below was almost unrecognizable. Skyscrapers were twisted skeletons, streets cracked and littered with debris. Fires raged in impossible patterns, consuming everything in their path. Mara swallowed hard and moved to the communications console. The colony's network flickered violently, a dying heartbeat struggling to survive. She slammed her fist onto the control panel, sending a desperate signal. Galactic Council, this is Nova Prime. We are under attack by unknown warlords. Civilian population at risk. We need immediate assistance. Please, anyone, help us. The console crackled and sputtered. The signal broke and reformed, like a candle fighting a gust of wind. Mara's voice shook as she repeated the plea. Please, anyone, respond. A sudden silence followed her SOS, deafening in its intensity. It stretched for long seconds, each one heavier than the last. The alien ships did not pause. Beams of energy tore through the remaining defensive satellites. Mara's stomach twisted as she realized the full scale of the threat. Nova Prime could not survive this alone. Far across the galaxy, in the cold, marble halls of the Galactic Council, the SOS arrived. Holographic screens flickered as Mara's desperate message repeated itself. Council delegates paused in mid-discussion. Some stared in disbelief, others in mild irritation. A few whispered among themselves, questioning why the humans were so fragile, so incapable of defending their own colony. They always call for help at the first sign of danger, one delegate muttered, his voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps they cannot survive without us. Another shook her head. We cannot risk sending reinforcements immediately. This could be a trap, or worse, an opportunity for humans to learn something themselves. Meanwhile, in the darkness at the very edge of the system, something moved. Silent, immense, and terrifying. A fleet unlike anything the humans had ever imagined cut through the void. Ships as dark as obsidian, lined with spikes and glowing red engines, moved with impossible speed. Their hulls reflected no light, their shapes alien even to the most advanced human senses. Inside the lead vessel, a massive figure observed the flickering signals. The Deathworlders, a species known across whispered legends as brutal hunters of the galaxy, had detected the SOS. Their eyes glimmered with predatory curiosity. They did not ask who Mara Voss was. They did not care about the Council's hesitation. Humans, one of the Deathworlders growled, its voice a low, resonating vibration felt more than heard. They call. We answer. Back on Nova Prime, Mara's console blinked again. She clutched it, hoping desperately that someone, anyone, had heard her. But the system, battered and overloaded, offered only static. She looked to the sky, to the massive warships tearing through her colony. Her chest tightened. This was it, the moment when survival seemed impossible. Ships darted across the horizon, smaller alien fighters weaving between the massive cruisers. Explosions pockmarked the atmosphere. Mara's team tried to coordinate the remaining human defenses, fire missiles, reroute power, jam communications, but every attempt was met with failure. They were tiny, fragile, and hopelessly outmatched. Her comlink crackled again. She seized it, voice barely audible over the screams and blasts. "To anyone, please, we cannot hold them." Then, a subtle vibration shook the ground. It was not like the blasts from the alien ships. It was slower, heavier, deliberate. Mara froze, her eyes snapping to the horizon. Shadows stretched across the sky as massive shapes appeared, moving faster than anything that should have been possible. The humans froze, unsure whether to flee or fight, their hope mingled with terror. The first Deathworlder ship sliced through the darkness, a jagged, terrifying silhouette against the burning sky. Its weapons glowed like molten fire, and in seconds, alien fighters that had seemed unstoppable were ripped apart in violent arcs of destruction. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She could barely comprehend what she was seeing. The SOS she had sent into the void, hoping against hope, had found an answer. Not from the Council, not from anyone she knew or trusted, but from something utterly alien, something far deadlier than anything she could have imagined. And yet, a strange sense of relief coursed through her. The humans might survive this day, though at a cost she could not yet fathom. Somewhere beyond the edge of space, the Deathworlders had arrived. And their definition of help was nothing like anything humanity had ever expected. The horizon was no longer just fire and smoke. Shadows moved across the sky, immense and unnatural. Nova Prime's remaining human ships froze in their orbits, unable to identify what was approaching. Captain Mara Voss pressed her hands against the console, eyes wide, as the first of the Deathworlders' fleet appeared in full. They were monsters of the void. Ships jagged as broken mountains, dark as black holes, with glowing red engines that left streaks of light across the inky sky. Their hulls bristled with spikes and weapons that hummed like predatory animals ready to strike. The humans had never seen technology like this. Every fiber of Mara's being screamed that these were not allies in any sense familiar to her, they were hunters. The first Deathworlder ship descended, slicing through the upper atmosphere. Alien warlord fighters scrambled, firing frantically, but they were no match. In seconds, entire squadrons disintegrated, shredded by weapons that humans could barely understand. The remaining enemy ships faltered, confused and terrified. "Report," Mara demanded, barely able to keep her voice steady. "Command, the enemy, they're being obliterated," her officer stammered. We don't know what is happening. It's not human weapons." A deep, resonating voice filled the comlink. It was rough, guttural, and commanding. "Humans, we have come. Do not interfere. Stand aside." Mara froze, unsure whether to feel relief or terror. The voice belonged to a Deathworlder, but there was no warmth, no comfort. There was only power, and a promise of violence. The alien warlords panicked. Their massive dreadnoughts tried to retreat, but the Deathworlders did not give them the chance. With terrifying precision, the dark ships cut through the enemy formations. Entire cruisers were ripped apart in seconds, debris scattering across the sky like deadly fireworks. Nova Prime shook as energy beams tore through orbiting ships, the ground trembling with each impact. Mara watched in awe, fear, and disbelief. They're saving us," she whispered to herself. The thought was almost impossible. Humans had always believed that help would come from the Galactic Council, from allies in uniforms and diplomacy, not from creatures whose very appearance screamed death. Yet, despite the destruction, the Deathworlders did not attack the humans. Their red-lit engines hovered near the colony, scanning, assessing. Each move was deliberate, controlled, like a predator circling its prey, but Mara had the strange sense that she and her people were under observation rather than immediate threat. "Captain," her communications officer said, voice trembling. They're communicating. They called us humans, they acknowledged the SOS." Mara's chest tightened. The SOS that had almost died in static, that had gone unanswered by the Council, had found its mark. But at what cost? These beings did not help out of kindness, they helped because something in humanity had intrigued them. From orbit, the Deathworlders unleashed waves of destruction. Alien warlord ships tried to regroup, firing massive energy bolts at the Deathworlders' lead vessel. The attacks bounced harmlessly, their weapons devoured by shields the humans couldn't even see. Mara's people watched helplessly, their tiny ships dwarfed by the alien hunters, as the deathworlders tore through the enemy fleet with precision and brutal efficiency. Explosions lit up space, fires dancing across destroyed cruisers. In moments, the balance of battle shifted completely. Nova Prime was no longer defenseless. The deathworlders had arrived, and the alien warlords realized that the humans were no longer prey. They had someone far more dangerous on their side. Yet the humans could not celebrate. The scale of destruction was overwhelming. Mara turned from the console to watch the city below. Fires still raged, buildings were toppled, and the cries of survivors pierced the air. Even with the deathworlders' intervention, survival was far from certain. A massive shadow passed over the city as the largest deathworlder vessel descended into orbit. Its hull stretched miles, a terrifying wall of obsidian and spikes. The alien warlord dreadnoughts froze as the ship's weapons glowed ominously, sweeping across the sky with deadly arcs of energy. Mara clenched her fists. "We owe them our lives," she whispered. Yet there was fear in her voice, for she understood that the deathworlders' concept of help was not the same as humanity's. They did not protect out of compassion, they protected out of interest, curiosity, and respect for strength. One of the smaller deathworlder ships descended closer to Nova Prime. Its massive sensors scanned the ground, noting the trembling humans below. Mara took a cautious step forward, her mind racing. Could she communicate with them? Could they be reasoned with? Or would a single mistake mean annihilation? Then, unexpectedly, the deathworlder spoke again. Its voice rumbled through the colony like distant thunder. "Humans, you have called. We answer. But remember, survival demands more than hope. It demands strength." The words were not comforting. They were a warning. Mara realized that this alliance, if it could even be called that, was conditional. The deathworlders had chosen to intervene, but they would not hold hands with humanity. They would teach them nothing except that the galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. As the first wave of enemy ships disintegrated under the deathworlders' assault, Mara felt a surge of adrenaline. For the first time since the attack began, hope flickered within her. Humanity might survive, against impossible odds, but at a cost they could not yet measure. The sky was still full of fire and smoke, still alive with destruction. But now, amid the chaos, moved something else, something unstoppable. Something that had answered humanity's call for help, and would reshape the very meaning of survival. Mara Voss took a deep breath. The deathworlders were here. The warlords would learn soon enough that humans were no longer defenseless. But neither Mara nor her people truly understood what it would mean to survive with the galaxy's deadliest hunters at their side. And in the silent void beyond, the deathworlders watched, waiting for the humans to prove themselves. The air on Nova Prime smelled of smoke, scorched metal, and fear. Even as the deathworlders tore through the alien warlord fleet above, Captain Mara Voss felt a cold weight settle in her chest. The humans had survived the first strike, but survival did not mean safety. The deathworlders were not allies in the way she understood alliances, they were something else entirely. Something dangerous. In the command tower, Mara studied the massive screens showing the deathworlder ships moving with deadly precision. Their sheer size and alien design made human warships seem like paper boats floating in a storm. Yet, she had no choice. If the humans were to survive, they would have to cooperate with these predators. She summoned her senior officers. "Listen," she said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting inside her. "They're not here to kill us, not yet. But they are here to judge us. They respect strength. That's all we have right now. And if we don't show it, we die." Her officers exchanged uneasy glances. Lieutenant Kieran, the youngest on her team, swallowed hard. "Captain, what exactly do they want from us?" Mara hesitated. She didn't know. Nobody did. These were the Deathworlders, a species legendary for brutality, unpredictability, and sheer cunning. Humans had observed them in history books and rumors, but never had one interacted with them up close, let alone survived. "They don't want diplomacy," Mara said finally. "They don't negotiate. They watch. They judge. And they kill if they see weakness. We survive by proving we are worth their attention." The command tower shook as another explosion rocked the city. Mara gritted her teeth and turned back to the console. The alien warlord dreadnoughts were regrouping, but the Deathworlders made short work of them. Entire squadrons evaporated in seconds, leaving nothing but twisted metal and debris floating in orbit. A deep, rumbling voice filled the comms, emanating from the massive Deathworlder ships. "Humans, step aside, or follow our lead." Mara felt the words as much as she heard them. The Deathworlders were giving instructions, not suggestions. This was her first real contact, her first true decision: obey, or risk being crushed. She took a deep breath. "All pilots, listen," she barked. "We follow their orders. Watch, learn, survive. Every human ship stays close to their formations. Any ship that leaves the path will be destroyed. Repeat, we follow their lead." The pilots nodded, fear and/or written across their faces. Even the most hardened veteran could not hide the tremor in their voice. Humans had never faced an enemy like this, and yet, somehow, these hunters were their salvation. Over the next few hours, Mara watched as the humans and Deathworlders moved together in an uneasy choreography of war. Small human squadrons flew alongside massive Deathworlder ships, guiding them through asteroid belts and debris fields where the alien warlords had tried to hide. In turn, the Deathworlders protected the humans, their terrifying weapons wiping out enemies with surgical precision. But survival came with lessons humans were not ready to learn. During a reconnaissance mission, one human pilot, Lieutenant Hara, accidentally fired on a fleeing alien vessel too early. A Deathworlder ship intercepted immediately. The alien commander's massive hull loomed over Hara's fragile craft. A red glow bathed the cockpit. "Humans, weakness, costs lives," the Deathworlder's voice growled through the comms. Hara's ship shuddered under the mere proximity of the Predator vessel, a warning more powerful than any missile or laser. She swallowed hard and fell in line, realizing the deadly stakes of every action. Back on the ground, Mara realized something unsettling. The Deathworlders did not teach in words, they taught in fear, in observation, and in action. Humans were learning that the galaxy did not reward mercy or hesitation. It rewarded strength, cunning, and decisiveness. Still, for all their terror, the Deathworlders had a purpose. Mara noticed it: they had no interest in killing the humans. They moved like predators evaluating prey, but not yet striking. They were watching humanity, waiting to see if they would rise to the challenge or falter. Hours turned into a full day of battle. Nova Prime skies were filled with blazing ships, explosions, and the roar of engines. The alien warlords, once confident in their conquest, were now forced into retreat. Mara could barely process the scene. Humans, so fragile and outmatched, had survived against overwhelming odds, guided by monsters of the void whose rules she could barely comprehend. Finally, as the battle paused, a Deathworlder ship descended to a lower orbit, sending a projection down to Nova Prime. The massive, spiked silhouette of the creature filled the sky. Mara could see the jagged outline of its limbs and the glowing red of its eyes. It spoke once more, its voice reverberating like thunder. "Humans, you call for help. You survive, for now. But strength alone is not enough. You must learn. You must adapt. Only then will you stand among the stars." Mara swallowed hard, realizing the truth of the words. This was no alliance of equals. This was a trial by fire, a harsh lesson in survival. The humans had been saved, yes, but the Deathworlders had already made it clear: one mistake, one hesitation, one display of weakness, and survival would end. And yet, as Mara looked out at the ruined colony, at the humans trembling in fear and hope alike, she felt a flicker of pride. They had survived the first encounter. Against impossible odds, against predators of legend, humanity had endured. For now. But the galaxy was watching, and the Deathworlders were waiting. The aftermath of the first counterattack left Nova Prime in eerie silence. Fires still burned across the ruined cities, and the ash-filled skies cast a dull orange glow over the shattered streets. Captain Mara Voss stood at the command balcony, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. The humans had survived, but the cost of survival was already etched into every corner of the colony. From orbit, the Deathworlders moved with terrifying calm. Their ships carved paths through the wreckage of the alien warlord fleet, crushing enemy vessels with precise, almost artistic brutality. Mara had watched them from the balcony, seeing humans scuttle through debris fields like insects, clinging desperately to life. She realized something unsettling: the Deathworlders did not see humans as equals. They saw potential, but potential that had to be earned in blood and fear. Lieutenant Hara's squadron returned from a reconnaissance mission, their small ships battered but intact. "Captain," Hara said, voice trembling, "the Deathworlders, they're teaching us, in a way. We're learning from them, but it's not humane. Not even close. We're doing things we never imagined. Killing, striking, we're becoming predators ourselves." Mara nodded slowly. She had seen the same thing in her officers. Humans were adapting, yes, but they were changing. Courage alone had kept them alive before. Now, ruthlessness and cunning were required. "Humans," a deep, resonating voice echoed across the comlink. It was the lead Deathworlder vessel, descending closer to Nova Prime. "You observe. You adapt. You survive, or perish." The words carried no kindness, no guidance. Only expectation. Mara realized then that this was a test, and the Deathworlders' way of teaching survival was through demonstration and fear, not dialogue. The next engagement came sooner than expected. A small group of alien warlord ships had regrouped, attempting to strike at the colony while the Deathworlders dealt with the main fleet. Mara's heart sank as she saw the tiny human squadron deployed to intercept them. The odds were hopeless, yet the Deathworlders had a plan. "Follow them exactly," Mara instructed over the comlink. "Do what they do, but don't overstep. One mistake, and you're gone." The Deathworlders moved with deadly precision. Ships twisted through the void, dodging attacks and returning fire with a level of coordination that humans could barely comprehend. And then Mara saw it. A small Deathworlder fighter rammed straight into an enemy vessel. The explosion tore through the warlord ship like paper. Hara's squadron flinched at the sight, but the Deathworlders did not hesitate. They repeated the strike with brutal consistency, crushing one enemy after another. Mara's stomach churned. Humans had never fought like this. Their training emphasized strategy and survival, but now, under the Deathworlders' guidance, the rules had changed. Swift, precise, and merciless strikes became the only path to survival. During the chaos, Mara watched a young pilot, barely 19, hesitate before firing. A Deathworlder loomed beside her ship, red glow illuminating her terrified face. "Weakness," the voice rumbled. "Costs life." The pilot's hand shook, but she pressed forward, releasing a volley that destroyed 2 enemy ships. Mara realized that the lesson was clear: hesitation meant death, and mercy had no place in the void. Hours stretched into a day of relentless battle. Nova Prime skies were a tapestry of fire, debris, and the eerie red glow of the Deathworlders' engines. Humans were surviving, yes, but they were learning to fight in a new, terrifying way. Each engagement stripped away innocence, each strike taught them ruthlessness. In the command tower, Mara watched carefully. Her people were becoming something new. Not monsters, but neither were they the fragile species the galaxy had always assumed. They were learning the hard truth: survival demanded more than courage. It demanded action without hesitation, decisiveness without fear, and the willingness to embrace brutality when necessary. A massive explosion shook the command balcony as the alien flagship tried one last desperate strike. Mara felt the heat of the blast even from orbit. Without warning, a Deathworlder ship intercepted, ramming the dreadnought with a terrifying force. The flagship crumpled in a cascade of fire and twisted metal. Mara's jaw dropped. Humanity had never witnessed such raw power before. "Captain," Lieutenant Kieran said, voice barely above a whisper, we're alive because of them. But, are we becoming like them?" Mara exhaled slowly, staring out at the horizon. "Maybe," she admitted. "But if we're going to survive, we have no choice. The galaxy doesn't reward mercy, Kieran. It rewards strength." From orbit, the Deathworlders watched silently, their red eyes glowing like embers. They did not celebrate, they did not speak. Their lesson was done. They had shown the humans what survival demanded. But there was no warmth, no guidance beyond the brutal example. Humanity had learned a vital truth: the galaxy would not bend for the weak, and no ally, no matter how powerful, would save them twice. Mara turned to her officers. "Prepare the fleets for tomorrow," she said. "The alien warlords won't give up, and neither can we. We've survived today, but tomorrow we fight like predators, or we die like prey." And as the Deathworlders continued their silent vigil, Mara knew one thing with certainty: humanity had changed. They had survived the first lesson of the Deathworlders, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. But with the next battle looming on the horizon, Mara understood that learning ruthlessness was only the beginning. The humans of Nova Prime had survived, but only by embracing a darker, sharper edge of themselves they had never known existed. And the Deathworlders were watching, waiting for them to prove they were worthy of survival again and again. Far across the galaxy, in the polished marble halls of the Galactic Council, silence had fallen. Screens flickered with the images of the chaos unfolding around Nova Prime. Council delegates leaned forward, eyes wide in disbelief. Ships exploded in the void, fires consumed cities, and yet, somehow, humans still survived. "They're still alive," one delegate whispered, his voice trembling. "After everything the warlords have unleashed, they're still alive." Another shook her head. "And it's not just survival. Look at how they're moving, with the Deathworlders. This isn't mere defense. They're learning, adapting. They're coordinating with them." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Council had long underestimated humanity. In their view, humans were fragile, unpredictable, and prone to panic. Now, those assumptions lay shattered before their eyes. "Bring me the communication feeds," ordered the Council's High Chancellor, his tone a mixture of awe and fear. The room obeyed immediately, screens flickering to show the devastated skies of Nova Prime, the human and Deathworlder fleets weaving through fire and debris. The High Chancellor leaned forward, studying the images. Every human ship, every maneuver, every daring strike highlighted something he had never anticipated. Humans could survive, and perhaps even thrive, when forced to face impossible odds. "They're fighting alongside the Deathworlders," said another delegate, voice tight. "Do they understand what that means? That species doesn't negotiate, doesn't ally, they judge, they destroy, and they respect only strength." "Yes," the High Chancellor replied grimly. "And yet, humans are standing. Their courage, their willingness to survive under unimaginable conditions, it's unlike anything we've seen." The Council had sent observers, intending to monitor the situation. They had expected panic, failure, perhaps even humanity's total annihilation. Instead, they witnessed something extraordinary: humans, small and fragile, surviving alongside the galaxy's deadliest hunters. "Are we underestimating them?" one delegate asked quietly, almost afraid to speak the thought aloud. The High Chancellor's gaze was steady, but his voice betrayed tension. "Not just underestimating. We are seeing a species that may no longer be controlled, no longer predictable. We've assumed humans were weak, but what if they're not? What if the Deathworlders' guidance, brutal as it is, has awakened something dangerous in them?" Meanwhile, back on Nova Prime, Mara Voss was unaware of the Council's fear. Her attention was fully on the battlefield, where the alien warlords regrouped for one last desperate strike. The humans had survived, yes, but the warlords were still powerful. And the Deathworlders, as ever, were inscrutable. "They're watching us," Lieutenant Kieran said, his voice low as he glanced at the massive shadow of a Deathworlder ship hovering above. "They judge everything we do." Mara nodded. "Yes. And we survive by proving ourselves worthy. Not to the warlords, not to anyone else, but to them. That's the only way we make it through this." In the council chambers, the delegates continued to watch, unable to look away. Nova Prime skies burned with destruction, yet the humans moved with purpose. They dodged, they attacked, they adapted in ways the council had never imagined. Each decision, each maneuver, was a gamble, yet they survived, and even succeeded. "This changes everything," whispered one delegate, voice barely audible. "If humans can do this, if they can survive this, what happens next? How do we control them?" The High Chancellor did not answer immediately. He continued to study the feeds, noting the humans' daring strikes alongside the Deathworlders. Each movement demonstrated courage, intelligence, and a cunning born not of training alone, but of necessity. Humanity had been cornered, tested, and had emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. "They are learning from the Deathworlders," another delegate said. "And the galaxy's predators, they respect that. Humans may have survived by chance before, but now they have proven they can survive because of their own choices. Not just luck. Not just strategy. Choice." Outside the council's halls, The void of space seemed impossibly quiet. Yet the humans of Nova Prime continued to fight, guided by monsters whose brutal lessons were reshaping them into something new. The Council could only watch, powerless, as the humans transformed before their eyes. "Prepare a full report," the High Chancellor finally said, voice calm but sharp. "And send a message to the other systems. Observe. Do not interfere. Humanity has changed. We cannot predict their next move, but we must understand it." Back on Nova Prime, Mara Voss felt the weight of every life in her hands. The humans had survived the initial attacks, learned from predators, and had begun to understand the brutal reality of the galaxy. But Mara knew the Council's eyes were on them, even if they were not present in the battlefield. Humanity's survival would be watched, judged, and perhaps feared in ways they could not yet comprehend. "Captain," Lieutenant Hara said quietly, they're watching us. The Council. Everyone. What if they fear us?" Mara looked out across the battered landscape, at the horizon still ablaze with destruction and the massive shadows of the Deathworlders overhead. "Let them fear us," she said firmly. "We've survived impossible odds. We've learned what it means to survive, to fight. Fear is the price of respect. And the galaxy will learn that soon enough." The Council may have hesitated, may have doubted, may have feared the humans, but Nova Prime had survived. Humanity had endured the first trials, and now the galaxy could only watch. And in that silence, Mara understood the truth: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The void above Nova Prime trembled with anticipation. Captain Mara Voss stood at the command balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. The alien warlords had not given up. Their dreadnoughts, massive and terrifying, returned in full force, determined to crush what remained of the human colony. The Deathworlders hovered silently, massive shadows of obsidian and red light, waiting. "This is it," Mara said, her voice low but steady. "No more second chances. Today we either fight, or we die." Lieutenant Kiran's hands shook slightly as he tightened his grip on the console. "The flagship, it's enormous, Captain. Its weapons, if they hit the colony, we'll all be gone." Mara nodded. "We know that. And that's why we fight. Stay with the Deathworlders. Follow their lead. Every human ship, every pilot, every life depends on it." The alien fleet surged forward, a tide of metal and fire. Their dreadnoughts unleashed waves of energy that cut through space, obliterating asteroids, debris, and smaller ships alike. But the Deathworlders were ready. Massive beams of crimson energy tore through the enemy lines, disintegrating entire squadrons before they could even react. Ships that once seemed indestructible twisted and shattered under the sheer force of the hunters' assault. Human pilots followed closely, dodging, weaving, and coordinating attacks with a precision born of necessity. Mara guided the smaller ships, directing them through narrow asteroid corridors, past debris fields, and toward the enemy's flanks. Every move was a gamble. Every misstep could mean annihilation. The flagship loomed ahead, massive and merciless, its weapons charging for another devastating strike. Mara could feel the heat through the command balcony as the dreadnought fired its first salvo. The Deathworlders intercepted instantly, massive shields absorbing the blast, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Human ships were tossed like toys in the turbulence, but none were destroyed. "Now!" Mara shouted. "Hara, Kiran, lead the strike." Lieutenant Hara's squadron darted forward, weaving between the Deathworlders and the enemy dreadnought. Mara's hands flew over the console, adjusting trajectories, timing weapon releases, coordinating with the massive alien ships. For the humans, it was chaos. For the Deathworlders, it was a deadly ballet. Energy beams carved arcs through the flagship, tearing away sections of its hull. The Warlord crew scrambled, desperately trying to regain control, but it was too late. The Deathworlders' attack was flawless, merciless, and swift. Suddenly, the flagship fired its most devastating weapon, a massive beam capable of destroying Nova Prime itself. Mara felt the ground tremble, alarm screaming. Human ships panicked, dodging and weaving, but the Deathworlders positioned themselves in its path. The beam struck a massive hull, sending sparks and energy arcs cascading through the void. The flagship shuddered, systems failing, and then exploded in a blinding flash that lit the darkness for miles. Mara's eyes widened as she watched the destruction. One massive enemy ship down, but others still remained, smaller and faster, harassing the perimeter. She turned to her officers. Keep moving. Keep fighting. Don't let them regroup. Hours blurred into chaos. Human and Deathworlder ships moved as one, striking, dodging, and overwhelming the remaining enemy forces. Mara watched as Lieutenant Kieran piloted his ship into the heart of a warlord squadron, taking out multiple enemy fighters in daring maneuvers. Hara's squadron followed, exploiting weaknesses revealed by the Deathworlder's precision strikes. Then Mara made a decision that could change everything. "I'm taking a squadron into the flagship's core," she shouted. "It's the only way to end this." Her officers froze. "Captain, that's suicide." "Not if we strike fast and smart," Mara replied. "We have to end this now, or Nova Prime will burn." The squadron, small but determined, followed Mara through the chaos. They dodged beams, weaved through debris, and finally entered the flagship's upper atmosphere. Mara's hands flew over the controls as they maneuvered into position, the massive enemy ship looming like a living nightmare. "Engage!" she yelled. Human ships fired in unison, weapons coordinating with the Deathworlder's devastating attacks. Explosions erupted inside the dreadnought, sending fragments of hull and energy arcs outward. Systems overloaded, fires spread, and alarms screamed across the enemy vessel. In a final, desperate move, Mara's squadron struck the command bridge. The flagship shuddered violently, then exploded in a blinding flash that lit the void for miles. The remaining warlord ships scattered, leaderless and terrified. The battle was over. Silence fell across the battlefield. The Deathworlders hovered, massive shadows in the glow of burning ships. Human ships floated among the wreckage, battered but alive. Mara exhaled, the weight of what had just happened pressing on her chest. "We did it," Hara whispered, voice trembling. Mara nodded, staring at the horizon where fires still burned, and the surviving enemy ships fled into the void. "Yes," she said quietly. "We survived. Against impossible odds, we survived." But the battle had changed them. The humans who had flown alongside the Deathworlders were no longer fragile, helpless prey. They had survived, yes, but they had learned brutality, courage, and precision under fire. They had learned what it meant to fight alongside monsters, and to live. From orbit, the Deathworlders observed silently. Their red eyes glowed like embers in the dark, judging, assessing. They had delivered the humans' victory, but the message was clear: survival demanded strength, ruthlessness, and courage. Mara understood that they had earned respect, but it was a respect that came with a warning. Nova Prime had survived. Humanity had survived. But the galaxy was watching. And after today, no one would ever underestimate them again. Mara turned to her officers. "Prepare for what comes next," she said. "The warlords may be gone, but the galaxy is bigger, deadlier, and watching. And we've only just begun to prove what humanity can do." And above them, the Deathworlders watched, waiting, knowing that the humans of Nova Prime had passed their first true test. But the trials of the galaxy were far from over. Nova Prime burned quietly beneath the remnants of the war. Fires still smoldered across the cities, smoke curling into the scarred sky, but the battle was over. Captain Mara Voss stood on the command balcony, her uniform scorched, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. The humans had survived the impossible. Against overwhelming odds, guided by the brutal Deathworlders, they had won. Yet victory was bittersweet. The city lay in ruins, thousands of lives lost, and the survivors looked around at the destruction with wide, haunted eyes. Mara's chest tightened. Humanity had endured, yes, but the price had been high. Lieutenant Hara approached, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Captain, we did it. The flagship, it's gone. The warlords, they won't bother Nova Prime again." Mara nodded. "Yes, but they weren't the real challenge. Surviving this battle, learning to fight like this, that's only the beginning." She looked up at the massive Deathworlder ships hovering above the planet, their jagged forms casting long shadows across the burning landscape. Their red engines glowed ominously, like embers in a dark void. The largest Deathworlder vessel descended, hovering close to the command tower. Mara's heart pounded as the alien's massive silhouette filled the sky. A deep, resonating voice echoed across the city. "Humans, you survive. You fight. You learn. Mara swallowed. Yes, she said quietly. We survive. And we fight for our people. We fight to live. And we will never bow to anyone. The Deathworlder's glowing eyes fixed on her, assessing, judging. You have learned much, but this is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast. Predators await. Allies, and enemies, will test you. You are no longer the fragile species we observed. You are capable, dangerous, worth watching. A shiver ran down Mara's spine. The words were both a warning and a recognition. Humanity had survived, not through mercy, not through diplomacy, not through hope alone, but through courage, adaptability, and ruthlessness when necessary. The Deathworlders had taught them lessons the galaxy had never imagined, and the humans had survived. From orbit, the stars shone cold and distant. The Galactic Council continued to watch, screens flickering with the aftermath. The delegates leaned forward, their expressions a mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. Humans had survived not because the Council intervened, but because they had adapted, learned, and endured alongside predators. This changes everything, whispered one delegate. They've survived, and they've proven they can survive with power no one expected them to handle. Yes, said the High Chancellor quietly, voice taut. And they will not be underestimated again. Humanity has entered a new era. The galaxy must watch, or it will pay the cost. On Nova Prime, Mara turned back to her people. Survivors were emerging from the wreckage, their eyes wide with shock and relief. Some stared at the Deathworlders, unsure whether to feel fear or gratitude. Mara knew both were justified. These alien hunters had saved them, but not out of kindness. They had saved them because humans had shown potential, and potential demanded respect. Listen up. Mara called, her voice cutting through the haze. Today, we survived impossible odds. Tomorrow, we rebuild. And after that, we make sure the galaxy knows, humans are not to be underestimated. Nova Prime is alive because of courage, because of learning, and because of strength. Remember that. Her officers nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Humanity had survived the battle, but they had also changed. They had learned that mercy alone did not secure survival. Strategy alone did not ensure it. Only courage, decisiveness, and a willingness to embrace brutality when necessary could guarantee life in a galaxy filled with predators. The Deathworlders remained above, silent sentinels of power and judgment. Mara understood that their lesson was ongoing. They had delivered humans victory today, but they would continue to watch, waiting for humanity to prove itself again and again. The alien fleet finally began to ascend, retreating into the void, leaving Nova Prime under human control. Mara exhaled, relief mingled with the heavy knowledge that the galaxy was not done testing them. Humans had survived, yes, but the universe was vast, unpredictable, and unforgiving. And yet, for the first time, Mara felt a flicker of something she had never truly believed in before: hope. Humanity had endured. Humanity had learned. Humanity had survived the impossible, and in doing so, had become something far greater than the galaxy had ever expected. The Deathworlders disappeared into the stars, but their presence lingered. Mara knew that their judgment would always be a shadow over Nova Prime, a reminder that survival demanded strength, ruthlessness, and courage. But it was also proof that humans could endure, adapt, and rise. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. And from the ashes of Nova Prime, a new chapter had begun. Mara looked out at the horizon, where the smoke of battle mixed with the light of distant stars. Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying across the command tower. We survived. We will rebuild. And one day, the galaxy will remember that humanity does not bow. Humanity does not falter. Humanity endures. And as the stars shone cold and distant above Nova Prime, one truth became clear: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.